and the mother makes some face. Well, long story short, the girl interpreted that face that the mom was upset with her, and then she fell on the next event, and she comes over after the event and she's crying, and the mother said, well, what happened? And she says, well, I looked at you after my floor routine and you gave me a dirty look.
Sometimes our brain just stops us from doing. We have a goal and we want to achieve it, but for whatever reason, we just can't. We've all experienced mental blocks, and I, like many coaches and other professionals, want nothing more than to help them overcome those stubborn blocks so they can continue to experience triumph. Our guest today, author of Champions Mental Edge, Turning Winners into Champions, a must-read for coaches, athletes, parents, and anyone looking to build a culture of champions literally and metaphorically. We welcome sports psychologist Robert B. Andrews. He is the founder and director of the Institute of Sports Performance, a practice located in Houston, Texas. He has extensive experience spanning gymnastics, swimming, track and field, and more, and has worked with athletes in college and pro leagues, including the MLB, the NBA, the NFL, worked with Simone Biles, Erica Fraley, Sean Townsend, and many more. They've all benefited from his expertise. Robert shares insightful stories. We explore strategies and practical methods for overcoming mental blocks. We discuss how managing stress can help us achieve peak performance and how we can really make an impact on our athletes, our kids, our students, or even ourselves by starting within. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's dive in.
Weather
With rain so far, not so much with snow just yet. It's just a ton of rain. We had a tough I believe it was not this week Monday, but last week Monday, we had a really bad storm. It took out part of our like white fence.
Uh-huh.
So it was pretty bad.
Wow.
Yeah, but no snow quite yet, which we're pretty grateful for. Yeah.
Well, how did you find me?
Well, so I've been coaching for the past 12 years. And I within the past 3 or 4 years, I've taken on this general manager role at the gym that we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that's always come up for us is, or at least dealing with the older girls, has been mental blocks. And in understanding what Simone Biles went through and how she was kind of able to kind of get back into it, I just started to, go down a rabbit hole of questions of like, how did she do it? What was her mind process? Who did she work with? What did they take her through? Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an interest in just psychology in general. Especially as it pertains to kids. Like I've always said, if I were to have one superpower, it would be to be able to, I guess, sit in someone's brain, not necessarily to read their minds, but to
Right.
be able to understand,
Mm-hmm.
what's happening in there for them, so that it'd be easier to help them or connect with them on a deeper level. And so, that's kind of what got me interested in it. And then as I was going through that, I literally typed up, Simone Biles is sports psychologist. And then that's how your name came up. And you came up, I knew about or have heard about your name a while back and read this bio that you had. I don't remember on what website. It wasn't on your website. I think it was on another website. But at the time I didn't know that you had a book.
Mm-hmm.
So I researched it again, and that's when I was like, oh wait, he has a book.
Great.
And then
Well,
that's when I took the time to actually read the book, and I was like, oh wow, there's so much in here that one has helped me, just in my own personal life, and helped me think of how I approach just
Mhm.
life and the things that stop me from doing things. And I'm now kind of like planning, we have these monthly clinics at our gym where we kind of, meet with the coaches, talk gymnastics, talk leadership, talk management, talk whatever. And I'm like planning a thing around, some of the I don't want to say worksheets, or some of the processes that you
Concepts. Yeah.
concepts, yeah, that you tell us to even try with ourselves in the book, that I would love to do with them. So, but that's how I found you.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. And thank you for getting the book and spreading the word. That's why I wrote it, just to help people better understand themselves, because I always say you can't change anything if you're not aware of what it is you need to change. So what I attempted to do with my book was create awareness, open minds, and then say, and here's some things you can use to help you do that. But there's also tools in there to help you maximize potential or show up more authentically, or whatever that person happens to be drawn to that book to help.
Yeah. So in that book, and I know we have a list of questions here, and I'm gonna try to kind of go over them, but I do know we have a limited time, so I'm gonna try to, you know, ask what I can. But in that book, you said you did have a calling. Like what was that calling like? I hear that you wanted to spread awareness, but what was it like for you at that time, of wanting to get into the field of sports psychology, coming from, I guess, speak about where you were coming from at first, because I know you were in
I'll
sports
make
and
this
all that stuff.
short because there's a lot to it. But I graduated from college in the early 80s and went straight into the oil and gas business. And I was in that for like 7, 8 years. And then that market dried up. Everything in oil and gas in Houston, Texas just evaporated. What am I going to do next? So I went into investment banking, and then that market dried up. The market crashed in 87, and I was just sitting there twiddling my thumbs. So I resigned from that firm, and I decided, well, what do I really want to do? So I took some time off, and I read and I studied, and I did a lot of introspective self discovery and learned more about myself and healed some things. And I came out on the other side of that wanting to go back to graduate school. So I went back and got my master's in psychology. I'm a licensed mental health professional. I did traditional psychotherapy for about 10 years. In that work, I did a lot of work with trauma, people in fatal, near fatal automobile accidents, mountain climbing accidents, you name it. Well, in 2007, I think it was in June of 2007, I was out at lunch with my wife, and I just had this rush, like, I know what I'm supposed to do next. And my wife looked at me, and I had tears in my eyes. And I've told this story so many times, but it's such a wonderful story of grace and being guided. She goes, "What is it?" I said, "I know what I'm supposed to do next." And she said, "What?" And I said, "I'm supposed to take all of the work that I've done, the research that I've done, the training, the supervision on trauma, and I'm supposed to help injured athletes overcome the psychological impact of traumatic injuries like ACL injuries and dislocated elbows and broken legs and things like that." So I started spreading the word to athletic directors and chiropractors and physical therapists, and boom, it took off. And then people started saying, "Well, do you do anything with sports performance?" Well, I had done a training called the Accelerated Behavior Change Training for many, many years, and it had a lot of human performance concepts in there. So I started weaving things together, and within, golly, within just a matter of months of hanging my shingle, I was working with three, four, six elite gymnasts here in Houston.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. And that's with that without having any experience in the gymnastics field, or.
I'm 6'3", 240 pounds. I'm too big to be a gymnast. I played football, basketball, and I ran track. And I knew nothing about gymnastics, but I was fascinated by the sport. And my daughter was in gymnastics at the time. And her coach said, "Well, you need to go check out this gym here in Houston. There's a bunch of elite guys training over there." So I went over there and introduced myself to the gym owner and the coach, and it clicked. And so three of those guys made it to the Olympic trials, and one of them made it to the '08 team, Beijing team. And so my wife and I went to the Beijing Olympics, and just a remarkable experience to see a team that wasn't supposed to qualify for team finals win a bronze medal. And Jonathan Horton won a silver, should have been a gold medal on high bar at that Olympics. And then they brought me in with the national team in '09, and I worked with the men's team from '09 through 2012. And then some things went on at the London Olympics that I wasn't real happy about, that weren't being willing to address. So I gave up gymnastics. I said, "I'm done with it. I got plenty of other sports I can work with."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was just kind of fed up with what had happened with the men's program. And that was October of 2012. And then in March of 2013, this man calls and says, I've got this daughter. She's really talented, doesn't have any confidence, doesn't believe in herself. Can you help her? Well, that was Ron Biles, Simone Biles' dad. And I said,
What?
yeah, just out of the blue, out of the blue. So I said, okay, let's get started. And from that point on, she never lost a meet. I worked with her from March of 2013 until July of 2017. And she just took off. But the key was helping her be happy and have fun doing gymnastics. And when she did that, when that smile lit up, that's Simone's essence, is that we call it that entertainer. And when she
Yeah.
started engaging that entertainer into her gymnastics, her body just responded magnificently. So then uh, I've had athletes in the last 4 Olympic Games, in gymnastics at least, many, many other sports, but in gymnastics from 3 countries, the last 4 Olympic Games, multiple Olympic gold, silver, bronze medalists, world champions. And so I tend to work with level 10s and ups now. I have associates that work with the younger athletes. And I worked with college athletes from, I don't know, 15 different universities around the country. So I love the sport. It's a remarkable sport that requires a strong mind and a strong ability to manage your emotions in the toughest of situations. So that's kind of the story how I got to where I am right now. So
That's awesome. So in talking about Simone, it's mind blowing to think that there was a point in which that she really just didn't believe in herself. Even with how talented she was, and I'm sure she was probably hearing how talented she was from her family, or even her coaches and stuff. What what was it? I know you talked about you call it achieving peak performance, right? What was it about making sure that like how did you I guess what was it about her that was unhappy, and how did you help her achieve being happy so that she can have that peak
yeah,
performance?
well, first off, what I want to say is anything that I say publicly about Simone is either in her book or her movie, or she's done a bunch of interviews about our work together. And
Yes, please let it be something that's not private and
this is all public information. I'm not going to disclose anything that's confidential. That's an ethical concern that I'm bound to. Okay.
yes.
So the long and short of it, they had a character play me in her movie, and it was funny. Like, he doesn't look anything like me, but one of the things he said in the movie, and this is what I said to her, was, "You don't look like you're having much fun." And she said, "Well, I'm not." And I hear that with gymnasts all the time. Is they're trying so hard and they're trying to be perfect. They're afraid to make mistakes, and they think that if they get emotional, that's going to help. And I always back them out of that and say, less is more. And so with Simone, we introduced this concept of taking your foot off the gas. Quit trying so hard and let your body do what it's naturally capable of doing. And it was like everything just slid into place with that. And she started having fun again. And I got invited to her first world championship celebration. And they had her videos on a screen, and they were her routines on a video screen, right? And so I'm
Mhm.
standing there watching them, and she comes up and stands behind me, and we watch all four together. I said, "You know what I like about that?" And she says, "I'm smiling." I said, "Yeah, what else?" And she looks and she looks and she goes, "The judges are smiling?" And I said, "Yes." When you get the judges smiling, subconsciously, they're not making as many deductions.
Mm.
They enjoy what they're seeing, you see? So everybody lights up.
So it's like they don't want to miss it.
They don't want to miss, well, they don't want to miss it, but it's like, if you're enjoying a beautiful, like, I love music and I go to a lot of live concerts. I'm not sitting there critiquing the hand placement on the guy on the bass or the lead guitar or what they're playing. He missed the beat on the drum. No, I'm enjoying the experience of the music. And that's what happens when you watch Simone. Have you heard, like, at last USA Nationals and Worlds, did you hear the audience with her?
No, I missed the last one.
It's thunderous. It's loud. Everyone
Wow.
is totally engaged with her gymnastics now. And I think right now she's doing the best gymnastics she's ever done. And I think it's because she learned so much through that Tokyo experience. She grew exponentially from the struggle, that's the gift of the struggle, right?
Yeah.
We always say in my family, if it's happening now, on some level, I'm ready for this. How can I grow from the experience? And she did.
Right.
And it's showing up in her gymnastics now. And what's cool though is there's other girls that are starting to kind of catch up with her a little bit. I think she's inspiring a lot of other gymnasts, at least in the United States. I don't think there's anybody internationally, maybe a girl from Brazil perhaps, but she's inspiring other USA athletes to get on it, and they're starting to narrow that. It's a big gap, but they're starting to narrow that gap a little bit.
Yeah, she set the bar for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So what would you you know, I guess in the short of it, and again, I recommend everyone to read the book. It's called Champions Mental.
Edge.
What is it? One second. Champions Mental Edge. That's right. I recommend everyone to read it. As others might be going through that in their lives, what do you suggest, for them to do? Because they love the sport of gymnastics, and a story that I hear often is a gymnast, or even an athlete in general, leaving the sport because they stopped having fun. And I guess, how do they find that fun in it? How do they, get themselves there?
I hear a lot about, not just in gymnastics, but I get a lot of calls from parents say, well, my son or daughter wants to quit their sport. And my interpretation of that is they don't have the life skills to handle what they're facing. So they're trying the only tools that they have, they're using, and it's not enough to get them through the struggle. So they burn out. They want to quit. So let's look at what your attempts are. Where did you learn beating yourself up? Where did you learn being a perfectionist? Where did you learn comparing yourself to others? Where did you learn crying and getting over emotional and putting so much pressure on yourself? Because those are the character traits or the approaches to the sport that create burnout. So we back them out of that and go, let's try some different approaches. How about learning to calm yourself down? How about learning to correct your mindset? How about learning how to focus on the right things? How to listen to your own inner dialogue? How to calm yourself down? How to listen to your body and calm your body down when it gets too. So we teach them all these new concepts, tools, and then they go back into it. And I would say 9 out of 10 don't quit. Some are just ready. Some have just had enough. It's a demanding sport. But I'd say 90% of them are like, wow, this is fun again. Let's go. And then they get better.
Yeah, because the pressure that they're placing on themselves isn't as high, and they're able to just manage the emotions that come with just work ethic and perseverance and things like that.
Yeah, because I've seen videos of athletes that I worked with crying on the beam. They fall, they get off, their heads on the beam like this, and they get back up, and they're trying to do a series like that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why? Why? Where did you learn that that's an effective approach? It's a dangerous approach to be up there emotional and tears go on your face. You're trying to do a release skill on high bar or bars or a series on beam or a crazy vault, and you're all emotional. Calm down.
Right.
And I've seen athletes who couldn't get a floor routine. These are world champion athletes that couldn't get their floor routine, and they're crying in our session. And I'm like, stop, slow down. And then the next week, oh, I just sent you a video of my floor routine. I love it. It all came together. Well, what did you do different? Well, I quit beating myself up, and I quit trying so hard, and I backed out of that. And I eased into it. I made it fun again, and I connected with my music, and I connected with my body and my gymnastics, and then the magic happens.
Wow. So and I guess what role? Because a lot of what I'm understanding is a lot of it has to do with internal the internal side of things, just how we're thinking of it, how we're processing our own emotions and everything like that. What role does any external factors play into that?
Well, if you ever, in my book, I talk about the primary triangle or the three-legged stool: parent,
Yep.
coach or coaches, and athlete. And I always say that all three of those legs of the stool have to be strong, or the athlete's not going to reach their full potential. I also talk about the 2-hour rule in the book. How parents, they're walking out of the venue. Why did you fall on bars?
Right. Waiting. You mentioned like waiting 2 hours before you talk about anything. Just
Thing
and
negative.
anything negative. That's right.
Yeah. Anything
Anything
negative.
negative or critique or feedback, anything like that, you wait at least 2 hours. Yeah.
Time to process that and integrate it. They're already being hard enough on themselves. You jumping into that mix, they're going to shut down, and then they don't process and learn from the experience.
Right.
What's that quote? There's no failure, only learning.
Right. Right.
Parents and coaches get into that bubble too quickly, then they interrupt that learning process. Because
Right.
I've
Because
had
they
a lot.
gotta.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say because they have to process what just happened in their performance or how they how they were themselves. They have to kind of figure all of that out. But go ahead. You were gonna say.
And I've had athletes on flights home from meets, or the car ride home from a meet, or they get home and write about your experience at the meet. Where did you have success? Where did you struggle? What did you learn from this experience? And then they send me their videos, and we go over each of their routines on a Zoom call, or if they're in my office, we do it live. Well, what was going on here? And I noticed when you fail, your whole persona, your whole affect changed. And tell me what happened and what shifted. And let's work to get you back regardless of what happens. And we teach a concept called becoming responsive instead of reactive. You know, a response is a mindful change in your mind state, your emotional state, your physiology, and your behavior. You get to decide what goes on. There's so many athletes and coaches and parents are so highly reactive to things,
Mm-hmm.
and that creates interference and distortion. And so their brains can turn over to the coach or turn over to the parent. Like, I've had athletes during competitions look up at the stands at their parents for approval.
Wow.
Yeah. And a crazy story. I was sitting by a mother and father, and a girl fell on her floor routine. She was having a great first two events, and then she fell on floor, I think it was. And she looks over at the mother, and the mother makes some face. Well, long story short, the girl interpreted that face that the mom was upset with her. And then she fell on the next event, and she comes over after the event and she's crying. And the mother said, well, what happened? And she says, well, I looked at you after my floor routine and you gave me a dirty look. And the mother says, what? She goes, I sneezed. You saw me after I sneezed, and you interpreted that as, isn't that crazy? I'm sitting right next to the woman. And I said, can I interject something here? I said, quit looking at your parents for approval during the meet.
Yeah.
You interpret a sneeze,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it just short circuited her, Isn't that
Yeah.
crazy?
That is insane. That is insane. It reminds me of, and I just digressing a little bit. It reminds me of how, and I don't know if this is related in a sense, but there's times where like little ones, like 3, 4 years old, they, might do something where they, try to handstand or something like that and fell over on the floor, and they're fine. They landed softly. It's just like, they might be experiencing some sense of embarrassment or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, the moment that their parent walks in, they burst right into tears because they were kind of like, they were just, like they were okay and trying to figure out what was going on. And the moment that the parent walked in, they're just like, I don't know if that's similar in a sense of kind of, being in the moment in something and then looking for your parents just to see what their reaction is so that you can know what your reaction should be.
Well, and I think that's a really good point. And what pops into my mind when you say that is, I think sports is meant, I think one of the gifts of being involved in a sport is to help us grow and develop as a child, as a young adult, as an older adult, if you're an elite athlete. And if you get caught in a culture that expects and demands perfectionism, and you're kicked out of the gym or go do conditioning or humiliated or embarrassed, what happens is that athlete begins to shut down and withdraw, and they stop developing psychologically. Their character and personality stops developing. And this, I don't see it as much anymore because the gymnastics culture, thank God, is changing. But back in the not too recent past, I saw 16, 17-year-old girls that acted like they were 10 because they were so stunted in their development from being yelled at and screamed at and kicked out of the gym and punished and all that crazy stuff that went on. thank God, like I said, I'm not seeing that as much anymore.
Mm. What do you think is different? How
People
what
are
changed?
people are doing stuff what you're doing right now. You're educating people. There's podcasts and there's books and there's workshops and there's trainings, and people are bringing in folks like me into their gyms to be on advisory boards or workshops or whatever that is. So there's this opening up of knowledge and awareness learning that's taking place, that's creating a new culture.
Mm.
I guess one of the best things for me is, so I've watched women's gymnastics now for 16, 17 years, and I love it how they smile now and they laugh and they hug each other and they comfort each other, and the guys are yelling and they're loud, and we didn't used to see all that. It was very stoic and guarded, and every girl was an island out there by herself. And in women's college gymnastics, they're all doing the floor routines on the side. You know what I'm talking about? And so
Yeah,
there's a sense of community and connection that I think is so important, that was missing in the old culture.
I
And there,
see, I see.
yeah, does that make sense?
that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
In your book, you mentioned something called switching places, right? And I think you worked with an athlete who, I guess you gave them a wristband, and the wristband it said champion on it. Am I mistaken?
Mind of a champion.
Mind of a champion. And you suggested that anytime they had any negative thoughts about, you know, anything, they have to now take that wristband off and put it on the other arm. Can you just explain the process of that and the reasoning behind it? I thought it was so genius. Go ahead.
So, well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's very simple. It's a simple exercise, isn't it? But it's
Yeah.
profoundly effective. So I have a lot of athletes that do a lot of don't thinking, don't fall, don't let my teammates down, don't embarrass myself. And the subconscious mind throws the don't out and creates whatever it is you don't want. So they think a lot of don't thoughts, a lot of have to thoughts, what if thoughts, comparing themselves to others, and worse. And so the idea of the wristband exercise is to create that mindfulness that we talked about when we started our program here today. Wear a hairband if that's what you have, or a rubber band, and every time you think a thought that produces doubt or fear or anxiety or erodes your self-confidence, take that band off, put it on the other wrist, and then correct the negative thought and do a positive thought, and then leave it there. And then when you have another negative thought, take it off and put it back on the other wrist and correct that negative thought into a positive thought. And the crazy thing here is I have athletes say for the first 3 or 4 days, they're changing their wristband 50, 60, 70 times a day. And they said, I had no idea my mind was so negative.
Wow.
But day 4 or 5, they look down, they go, oh, wow, it's 10:30 in the morning. I haven't changed it yet. I'm eating lunch.
Wow.
I haven't changed it yet. Yeah. It's
And
like a
how
it's like a GPS system, You get
Mhm.
off track on a GPS system, it corrects you, gets you back on track in the most efficient path back, right?
Right.
If your mind goes in the wrong direction, GPS back on track again. And I say wear it for 21 days. And in 21 days, you can profoundly change your mindset. Anyone can if they choose to do it.
Right, right. How did you come up with that? I mean, it's just such a great idea.
I don't know. It was a long time ago. So I don't remember how came up with it. And then I came up with the idea of mind of a champion. And I put that on the
Yeah.
wristbands. And it's kind of cool because I had a girl come in to see me, and she was in her high school chemistry class, and she reached for a beaker. They have them in tables of 4 working together. And her and another girl reached for a beaker at the same time, and they both had a mind of a champion wristband on. They looked at each other. You see him? Well, yeah. And they just formed this bond, and they talked shop together. They supported each other in integrating this new language of mental performance. It was kind of cool to see that they connected through something as simple as a
Mm.
wrist.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Um, in in your book, you also mentioned the amount of energy that people are putting towards things. Sometimes we have just so much going on in life. If we're, you know, in a sport, all of our focus we would think is in that sport, but really it's not, because part of our brain is thinking about, life, relationships, bills, schoolwork, whatever it is. If you can speak on that more.
Well, we're a very distracted society, aren't we?
Yeah, for sure. Especially with oh my goodness, like I read somewhere that, yeah. And I read somewhere that even kids nowadays, like they spend, I forget how many hours, but a number of hours actually just like scrolling. And there's this addiction that happens with just using
It is
your
an
thumb and
addiction.
scrolling. It's so funny actually. Yesterday, I kid you not, I was with a friend, and I had sent her something, and then I was with her when she looked at it, and she reacted to what I sent to her, and I felt the phone vibrate in my pocket. And I knew that like the vibration, had to do with her reacting to it, but for whatever reason, I had an urge that I had to fight
It's a
to
pull,
not
isn't it?
actually. Oh my, it was so weird. I'm like, I know what the vibration is. I know I don't need to check it because I know what it is, but for whatever reason, I want to look at it. It was the weirdest thing.
It's like a magnet to your mind. It just
Yeah.
pulls. That's why I have mine over here, turned off, face down, and I don't want anything interrupting what you and I are doing here. And I make a point when I go to lunch with somebody, my phone is in my pocket. If I'm sitting there with someone and their phone's on the table,
Yeah.
there's a part of them that's not present with me. Like I had lunch with a guy years ago, good friend. He's just sitting there texting, texting, da, 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 texting. And finally, I said, "Hey, if you don't put your phone away, I'm going to slap a 20 on the table and I'm going to get up and take my lunch and I'm gone."
Mm,
He kind of looked at me and he put his phone away. We had a meaningful connection over lunch.
yeah.
But you were talking about mental blocks. One of my interpretations, unless first place I look with mental blocks is an injury. Did
Hmm.
you break it? Did you break your arm? Did you have a dislocated elbow on vault or something? But it's always stress related, and I think a mental block is the mind's way of saying there's too much going on up here. You're overloaded. There's too
Mhm.
much interference, and phones and social media and comparing yourself to others and looking to see if everybody liked what you posted and all that. That is a huge source of stress. But I also see a lot of athletes that are procrastinators, and so they're getting ready to start a meet on Saturday morning and they have a big project due next week that they haven't started. How much of their mind is on gymnastics and how much of their mind is on that project that they haven't even started, that they know on the ride home that afternoon or the flight home or Sunday when they get back, they got to get busy and get after it. So
Hmm.
take care. We call it tying up loose ends.
Mm.
Stop procrastinating. And I tell athletes 3 or 4 weeks out from a competition, start writing down what your list of stressors are. And I have a stress worksheet that I share with athletes I work with. And what are your list of stressors and the things that you can control and do something about, take action on those and strike those off your list. And then you get that energy back because it's not just physical energy. More importantly, it's mental and emotional energy. And when you quiet those distractions or tie up those loose ends, you get that energy back and you're more focused and in the moment on the skills that you're trying to accomplish.
Hmm. And in those moments where you're not able to get rid of the stressors, like there's just some stressors that either take time to, get rid of. What do you do in those moments?
You compartmentalize. I think in the book I talk about the college football player who was horribly distracted. His first college punt was blocked and returned for a touchdown, and his parents were struggling financially. They were afraid he was going to lose his scholarship, and they were telling him that if you lose your scholarship, we can't pay for your education. And his mind wasn't on punting. In his first 2 games of the season, he was averaged like 31 yards a punt. He's shanking it all over the place, and his high school football coach paired us up together, and we did some work to calm his brain down around that block punt. Uh, but then we created this really cool ritual where when he got off the team bus on the walk from the bus into the stadium, he reached down and picked up a rock, and then he
Mm.
squeezed all of his anxiety and his fear and his distractions into that rock. And when he got to his locker, he put it up where he puts his shoes, And then he got dressed and went out and played the game. And then on the way out, he took that rock and went and dropped it back in the parking lot. And it was just a ritual to symbolize, okay, I'm going to leave all my stress in the locker room here. I'm going to leave my anxiety, my distractions, the things that I can't control. I also taught him how to talk to his parents and set boundaries. We call it learning how to protect your castle. So I taught him how to protect his castle with his parents and compartmentalize. And he finished the season averaging like 48.5 yards a punt with those two first bad games. If we had been working together the whole season, he would have averaged over 50 yards a punt.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know you mentioned he had to, speak with his parents.
Mhm.
Are there things that parents may not know that they're doing that, over time is actually detrimental, right? Like one of the things you mentioned earlier, which was, within the first 2 hours, don't discuss anything negative, or constructive criticism or anything like that yet. Give it time. Is there anything else that parents could be doing that they're not aware of? Things like
I
that.
think in the book I provide, maybe it's on my video series. I don't think it's in the book, but I have a supportive parent contract. And it talks about,
Supportive parent
yeah,
contract. Interesting.
yeah, and it's tough. And I actually have parents read it with their kids, and they reluctantly pick up a pen and, okay, but it says things like, I agree not to talk about my coaches or other athletes in front of my child. I agree to the 2-hour rule. I agree to take care of my business to where I'm not distracted when I go into my kids' practices or performances. I agree to learn to recognize what my triggers are, the things that throw me off in a competition that start getting me upset, and take care of business. I agree to do things within a competition to calm myself down. Like with my daughter's volleyball, I used to walk around the arena if I started getting frustrated. And I'd calm myself down, and then I'd come sit down again. So there's this whole list of things that parents agree to do to be supportive parents.
Wow.
To be a tank filling parent instead of a tank draining parent. So there's all kinds of things parents do. So it's about education, which is another reason I'm glad you're doing this, to get parents to think, is what I'm doing, it's a real simple yes or no. Is what I'm doing feeding energy into my child's system, or is it depleting energy from that system? Getting in the car and turning around and say, why did you double fault the match away in tennis? Or why did you fall? You had to meet one and you fell. Why did you do that? That's not doing any good.
Yeah, that's powerful. Wow. And as coaches, oftentimes we say things like, hey, just do it, right? While they might be struggling with something, So in a similar way that sometimes, parents may not be aware of how they're actually feeding into their athlete, what are some ways coaches can be, I know definitely educating ourselves and things like that. But I guess in those moments, what questions can we ask, if a child is saying, I'm, I don't know why I'm not going for it. I don't know, because they may not know if they're scared. They may not know what's going on with them as well. How can we go through that process with them?
The first thing I want to say is the worst thing a parent or a coach can say to a child who's or an athlete who's has a mental block or struggling is, why can't you just do it? What that does is it creates shame and embarrassment. So please stop asking that question. Why? Because if they knew, they would already have it figured out, right?
Right.
So it's a ridiculous statement that only creates more stress and pressure that's pushing down on an athlete that already has a tremendous amount of stress and pressure. The other thing is, don't punish them if they have a mental block, because then what happens is their brain is fixated on, I don't feel safe on backward skills on floor, or I don't feel safe on my series or beam, or I don't feel safe on this vault, or this Tkachev on bars, or whatever it is. Their brain turns their attention over to the ridiculing or punishing coach and goes, oh, well, now you're part of the problem. You're a threat. You're a source of stress here. And so then the coach gets put into that filing system, because in essence, the brain starts filing information away that's all related to stress or fear, anxiety, or embarrassment or whatever it is. So now the coach has put themselves in that file, and they're part of the problem, or the parent that condescends, or why can't you just be like so and so? Look how beautiful he or she is on that event. Well, then the parent has just put themselves into that file, and now they're part of the problem.
So you mentioned, obviously the things that we shouldn't do. What can we do so that, because you mentioned like the emotions like shame and disappointment and stuff, and at times those emotions are inevitable, right? We all feel it, we all go through it, and very often it's not because someone else is shaming us. It's just we know that internally just something's not right, and it just it presents that emotion. So how can we, or what questions can we ask, what can we do so that we can support athletes instead of kind of saying, hey, why can't you do it? Because like you said, they don't know. If if they knew, they'd be able to make it happen, right?
No, and most of them say, I know that I'm not going to go because I get this feeling in my body, which means a certain part of the brain has been activated that's created a sensation in the body that's associated with balking or the twisties or mental blocking or whatever it is. So I always, like I said earlier, the first place I always look is there been a serious injury, a bad fall? Like I worked with athletes, gymnasts who have gotten up and gone into the air on floor and gotten disoriented, landed on their head and had a concussion. And they're take some time off and they come back and they can't do that pass. Well, why can't you just do it? Well, get them the help they need, because there's resources out there that can help calm an overactive brain around a torn ACL or a broken ankle or a dislocated elbow, a broken wrist, a concussion. There's resources out there that can help calm the brain down around those types of falls or accidents or injuries. So that's step one. And then step two, start identifying sources of stress. Like I had a gymnast she's an elite gymnast, struggling on vault recently. And I sent her mom my stress worksheet and she completed it. And it was like, holy cow, I had no idea I had all these distractions and all this stress going on. So we walk through it. Let's put a check by the ones you can control and do something about. Well, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can quit worrying about social media. Yeah, I can. And well, I feel a lot better. Okay. And the ones you can't control, let's minimize the amount of energy that you're putting into it. So I check in with her mom the next week. How's she doing? She's doing great. Nailing her vault, doing fine. She managed her stress. You see?
So we got to help them. We can help them one of the things that we can do is try to figure out ways to help them manage their stress.
And also mindset. Because I had a girl in here just yesterday that I'm helping through some mental blocks, and she's so talented. My gosh, she's a freak. But there's just this one skill she can't do because she has a mental block on it. So I said, do you ever compare yourself to others? Yeah. Are you always the one down in that comparison? Well, yeah. Do you ever think don't thoughts? Oh, all the time. Do you ever think what if? Yeah. How do you finish what if? In a negative way. Do you ever think have to thoughts? Yeah.
It's very common for someone. It's oh man, you hear it all the time. What if I don't make it? Well, this could happen. Well, what if you do make it?
They don't think that way. It's always negative. What if I fall? What if I embarrass myself? What if I don't get on the podium? What if schools don't look at me? What if I don't get this skill in time?
Yeah.
And those are all four of those. What if, don't, have to, and comparing are all pressure producing thoughts. And like I say, stress and pressure pushes down on the great athlete, and then the struggling athlete pops up. That's just how stress and pressure work.
Right. And I remember you mentioned that at times, that stress or that mental block can come from something that may have happened many years ago, right? You mentioned injuries, but even something that doesn't have to do with an injury, that can actually bubble up later on. Right? Is that?
Yeah. I was talking to a parent recently, and their athlete is in sport A, right? They used to be in sport B. So I'm talking to the parent, and I'm listening, and how this athlete is struggling with not reaching their full potential or struggling with taking feedback from coaches. And I said, have they ever had a concussion? And they go, well, yeah, they had a couple in sport B over here, not in sport A, but sport B. And I said, well, let's get to work on those concussions. So eidetic imagery and EMDR are two protocols that are amazingly powerful with any kind of injury. And I treat a concussion just like I do an ACL. So she comes in for 2 sessions. We taught her brain how to process the trauma, the fear, the anxiety around concussions that happened years ago in sport B. And then they go back to sport A and PR'd the next week, did their personal best the next week.
Wow, that's awesome.
Because we taught the brain how to calm down. We took the energy that was managing the traumatic nature of those concussions, those injuries, and channeled that energy back in to performance. They also did some things to create balance in their life. They also did some things to fill their tank up, activities away from their school and away from their sport to help re-energize the system. They took care of some stressors. So all those things collectively, they go out and all that energy is going into their sport now. You see how it works?
Yeah. Wow, okay. So and a lot of it is really brain education, really understanding how the brain works.
And self-awareness,
Right.
mindfulness. Yeah.
Wow.
But that's why, and I don't mean this to sound arrogant but our practice is different. I've got 3 other associates and one I hope is getting ready to come back from maternity leave in my practice. And we look at all the things that you and I are talking about. I've had athletes come to see me and say, oh, I had no idea sports psychology could be so complicated or so complex. And I say, well, what do you mean? Well, the sports psych that I see just has me visualize and say I got this. Visualize and say I've got this. Oh, and breathe. They tell me to breathe. And that's all what traditional sports psychology is.
That's a lot of what we say too, yeah.
It's neck up sports psychology. It's all in the head. Well, let's look at the body. Let's look at your life. Let's look at your character and your personality. Let's look at your distractions, your relationships. Are you connected to things that fill your tank and evoke passion in you? That's what we look at. And that's what I think sets us off from everyone else out there. And it's why we're so successful at what we do. Now I'm starting to get charged up here.
I love it. I love it.
I take pride in our approach. It's a remarkable approach. And yeah, if they score more points or jump higher or get better skills, that's great. But if they're becoming better young men and women and living authentically and developing character, that's even better to me.
See, and I think this is why I'm enjoying speaking with you, and thank you so much for taking the time. Is because that's part of our philosophy as well at Energy. Just the way you're it's like, yeah, the sport is amazing, and the other aspect is the sport is really, when you think about it, a big part of their lives for a short moment. They have a whole life that isn't really revolved around that sport, and it's how do they go out in the world and be a person of integrity and be a person that people can connect to and relate with, and how do they go out in the world and manage rejection and be ready for anything that gets thrown at them in life, right? Because a lot of times gymnastics can help you prepare for that, and while we're using gymnastics as a medium to help with that, a lot of it it has to do with their, how do we get them ready for life? Like we're older than them for the most of the time. Then we're older than the students most of the time, and we have experience in life that we can share with them so that they can be better prepared.
Yeah, and that, to me, that's the essence of life. It's like we're all moving out in life. We should be expanding, right? Growing, developing, and then that growth and expansion, guess what? We meet interference, we meet challenges, we meet setbacks, and those are those key moments of friction where we get to learn how to develop life skills and emotional intelligence or resilience or grit or whatever it is that we need to work on. And then guess what? Once we learn to move through the resistance, we grow even more and we meet more resistance. But what happens with too many people, too many athletes is they meet resistance and then they shut down and they go a different path,
Hmm.
or they internalize and don't allow themselves to grow from the experience. And I've had situations in my work with sports that have been horrible. You know, relationships have ended abruptly and not in good ways.
Hmm.
But you know what? I sit back and okay, how can I grow from the experience to where I avoid that happening in the future? Not, I'm never doing that again. I'm not
Right.
taking that risk to work with that team or organization again. I'm not putting myself, no, I pick myself back up and I learn and I grow. And you know what? The next team or organization that brings me in, they get a better version of me. And that's
Right.
how it's supposed to work. We
Yeah.
evolve, grow, we change, we get better, not shrink and withdraw.
Right. And you mentioned earlier that, 9 out of the 10 times, it works for the athletes that you're working with. Are there moments in which, like even with that 10%, are there moments in which getting over a mental block isn't possible? Or is it just that? Go ahead.
Um, the longer a mental block lasts, the more difficult it is to treat.
Mm.
So I had a pole vaulter, elite, incredibly talented pole vaulter, all of a sudden started getting mental blocks. We got them 3 weeks. We got them onto my schedule 3 weeks after they started the mental blocks, and they worked through it very, very quickly. When I get the call, well, how long has little Susie or Johnny had their mental block? Like 4 years. What's happening is they're going into the gym or their sport and they're recreating the neurological imprinting of the mental block. They're facing the same cues and triggers, the same reactions in their body, the same emotionals keep getting burned in over and over. And eventually it becomes like the Grand Canyon. It's a really deep, wide neurological burn in, and it's really hard to change that.
Mm.
And there's some that are so, what's the right word here, that it's so profoundly ingrained in them that I just haven't been able to help. Now I have
Hmm.
an associate, Michael Heck, who I think he's even better than I am with mental blocks. He's got some kind of gift there with it. And I sent some cases that I haven't made progress with to him, and he's made progress in with those difficult cases. But if you take a kid that's having a mental block and we help them, but they keep going back to parents and coaches that are part of the problem, they're not going to, they're the chances of them working through the mental block are going to be diminished also, because we just keep feeding them to the wolves, so to speak. Come on in here, let's get you calmed down, let's get your system calmed down. Here's some coke. Okay, now go get screamed at and humiliated.
Which is not a good way to leave a session. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you've gotten quiet. Why? Well, I got to go to gym tonight, and I know the coach is going to ask me why I'm not. Why can't you just do it? And they're going to go make me do handstands and ropes as punishment because I can't do this skill.
And how do we create more of a I guess teamwork type of thing around that, being able to say, hey, you know, I don't know, I guess how do we get that coach to be more connected with that athlete
You
and
do
The
what you're
process
doing
that they're
right now.
going through.
You do what you're doing right now. You're boldly creating this podcast to say, I want to help change the culture. I want to help influence the culture. Good for you. I love it when people ask me to do interviews like this, because we get to put some light into the culture, right?
yeah,
That's the only way it's going to change. But it's also going to take people that are willing to say, there's some areas I could improve as a coach or a parent. Yeah, I'm
Right.
going
Right.
to. Yeah, I can't wait for you to send it to me so I can pump it out into my social media, because people need to hear this information.
yeah. Wow. Robert Andrews, thank you so much. Do you I guess how do you want me to refer to you? I never even asked that in the
Robert's
beginning.
fine. Yeah.
Robert's fine. Okay. Robert, thank you so much for taking the time. This was an incredible conversation. Um, and again, I really love your book. I tell people to read it all the time.
Thank you.
Like I even so I've I've purchased a Kindle not too long ago, and that was actually because of a student of mine actually who, when she was younger, this was, she's actually a coach for us now. Amazing person. When she was younger, she didn't really listen to music and things like that. I remember asking her, like, what do you do for fun? You know, what's kind of like your thing outside of gymnastics? She was like, I don't know, I just read. Like, this is someone who at the time didn't listen to music, she didn't watch TV, she didn't do any of those things. She just enjoyed reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow. And me, myself, I've learned that I actually love reading, but I've learned that later in life. Because growing up, I wasn't really taught to, you know, oh, find things that you actually enjoy reading. I was just forced to read things in school, you know? But in understanding that she enjoys reading, I asked her, what does she read things on? What's her favorite type? I was just kind of, asking her these questions, and I found out that she enjoyed reading through a Kindle. And I ended up buying a Kindle, and I was like, oh man, this is the best thing ever. Like, I've been able to just
Cool.
travel with this, have my library in there. And then when I got your book, I was able to really, excuse me, I was able to get through that, take some notes, jot some things down, and that's how I kind of came up with some of the talking points and questions. But anyways, yeah, I just
Well,
kind of.
you've got a bunch of other questions. If you want to let people digest this for a while, and then we can pick this up again down the road, I'd be happy to finish your questions, because your questions are profound, and I know we just got through some of them today. So let's let everybody digest this a little bit, and then pick it back up at some point.
Oh, I'm happy to. I'm so happy to. Robert, thank you. Thank you so much. This was great. Thank you for your time. Enjoy speaking with you. And yeah, hope to speak with you again soon.
All righty. Thank you. Take care.
All right, Robert, take care. Have a great rest of your day, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.